Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Derbyologist, and joining me again this week is Candace here. Candace, last week, a couple of the final two big preps of the prep season for the Kentucky Derby. And first off, let's go to Arkansas Derby, kind of a surprise winner there.
Yes, I don't know about you, but I certainly was not expecting Danza to show up as he did over in Arkansas. I was really looking towards, Tapiture and Bayern and some of the more lower-priced horses, but they all got shunned. He pretty much stole the show there. And, I've watched this race probably about 10 times, and I think I finally decided that he's got to be pretty good because I can't really fathom that nobody else in that race showed up because he just really trounced the field there. His pedigree isn't necessarily what we'd want for a classic router, but that kind of seems to be the trend this year. All these horses out running their pedigree, and he's certainly one of them. And he's lightly raced, and I think from off his effort he can kind of go either way. But he's not one who, I haven't tossed him when it comes to the Derby. I'll be keeping a close eye on him when we, the field gets down to Churchill and are working and such, because the manner of which he won this race was, was kind of breathtaking, just because I didn't see it coming at all. I was pretty disappointed by Tapiture. At one point, about midway through the race, he started making a move on the outside, and I actually thought he was going to, go up there and get the win, and he just kind of stopped. And, for me, all I wanted to see from him is how he finished in that race to see if he'd won 10 furlongs, and I did not get good vibes from that at all, and it's made me really, really rethink him as far as a Derby prospect.
It was interesting because Strong Mandate had kind of indicated in some of his morning workouts and by losing some weight that he was going off form. So I think that was a little bit predictable for Strong Mandate to not show up. Ride on Curlin kind of ran his race. I do think the trip of Danza's hasn't been totally evaluated. I mean, what people don't realize, and he made his move exactly at the rail when the rail opened up 20 feet. And I think the margin of victory was just the embodiment of a perfect trip. And I think that was like a perfect example that a horse can win by 3 legs if every single thing goes its way. And I'm not sold on him. I'm definitely Street Boss as a sprint. It's more synthetic. The mare doesn't provide any distance. Usually they're precocious runners. It was a second race off the layoff with 1 sprint prep. I'm just going to kind of chalk it up as, kind of a fluky performance. Tapiture still intrigues me. He didn't make his move on the turn. New jockey. Evidently, if they do run in the Derby, they're going to go back to Santana. That's probably a wise decision with that one. Rosario just seems to ride too many of his horses the same lately. He just goes back and tries to make a sweeping move, and that doesn't work for every horse. A little bit disappointed in Conquest Titan, but I think, again, the same thing was just been a long campaign, and that finally caught up with Conquest Titan as well. What about the Bluegrass Stakes? You were there live to watch that one in Kentucky.
Yes, and I know for a while we've been talking about Bobby's Kitten, and Bobby's Kitten's race was over from the start when we knew there was going to be a lot of speed in there, and he was pulling pretty hard from the get-go, and I think that pretty much sold his race there. Keelan's been pretty friendly to closers, and this race was no different from what we've seen since opening day, with Dance with Fate ultimately getting the win. And that was a really nice race, a really nice ride, I thought, from Corey Nakatani there on Dance with Fate. And we don't know for sure if he's going to go to the Derby or not, but personally I love it. I think it's a good story. You know as well as I do that Two Step Salsa is one of my favorite sires, especially for juveniles. So, I'm really glad for him, and he has all these small crops. I'm really grateful for him to have, one of his progeny get a really big Grade 1 win. As far as any of these horses in the Derby, I really like Medal Count going forward. I thought he ran a really nice race here in the Bluegrass, and he had a wider trip than Dance with Fate and didn't finish too far behind him. So, he's one who I really have on my radar when we get to Churchill. Pablo Del Monte ran a humongous race here. He was on the lead the whole way. For him to stay on and finish third, the way Keelan's been playing, and with as fast as they went, I kind of thought Pablo Del Monte, maybe you could make a case, ran one of, if not the best race of anyone in this field.
It definitely ended up being a horse-for-course type race. I mean, Giants Causeways like the Poly, Keeneland Poly especially, and Pablo Del Monte ran a strong race on the front end. Middle count, I still have no clue what to do with him. I mean, his whole trip to the Derby has been one bizarre 12-day run where it was first he was scheduled to run in a turf race. It got washed to the poly. He ran really well. They swung him back. And now the Derby would be his third race in 5 weeks. He definitely has a distance pedigree, but unlike, I don't mind playing horses that have never ran on the dirt, but normally when you have horses that have ran a couple of times on the dirt and then significantly improve on the poly, those are the type that you usually throw out. So medal count is still to be determined. It looks like he may go. Pablo Del Monte wants to go, possibly Vince Ramos, and today some news, Constitution getting an injury, and that kind of is, allowed one of the horses that you like to get in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big shame for Constitution, but I am a big fan of Uncle Si, and we didn't get to talk about it before, but I thought his Wood Memorial trip was, I think, pretty much, up to this point, I'd say in the major preps that was kind of the most impressive under-the-radar performance, I guess I would say, with how wide he had to go there, and he was still coming home. The only horse who was going faster than him coming home was your winner in Wicked Strong. So Uncle Si is one who I really, really, really am looking forward to in the Derby. So, shame for Constitution, but a little bit of a silver lining for me personally, because I do want Uncle Si there. I think he's earned credit.
This week, the Illinois Derby is one of two preps, not necessarily for the Derby, but for late developing 3-year-olds. And kind of interesting because Midnight Hawk has the points to run in the Derby, and they haven't ruled out a Derby run, yet he's running in Illinois, probably because one of his owners happens to be a high-profile hockey player, a coach in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only reason that I could think of it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but they haven't said that he's not running in the Derby, so, at this point, it seems like, maybe the longer they wait without an answer, the more likely it'll be that he'll be there. This field isn't the strongest. I mean, Midnight Hawk is certainly the class of the field, and, we've talked about him many times now with his runs at Santa Anita and his second place finish over at Sunland. He just always runs his race. I mean, he's not flashy, not going to blow your mind, but he's consistent and he's always up there. He'll be beyond heavily favored here, probably even money or less. So if you're betting the race, he's definitely not going to be worth a bet by any means. One who I did want to mention, if you're going to try to go against him at all, I don't totally mind a horse here named Class Leader. He's ran 3 times. He's won twice in a row down at the fairgrounds, and the races he's gone against some decent horses. He struggled a little bit in his debut, but that was kind of a loaded debut. Son of a Preacher, Be Well were in there, who we've seen in the stakes. Albano, he ended up finishing 3rd in there, so maybe it doesn't look so bad now. But that was in his debut. Since then, he's won twice over at the fairgrounds, and most recently over Divine View. So, there isn't a whole lot to go off of. He's obviously lightly raced, and clearly this is a step up in class facing Midnight Hawk. But of kind of all the other horses here, he seems to be maybe one worth putting just a little bit of money on if you can get a price.
I'm definitely picking Midnight Hawk. I think he has a pace advantage. I think he also has a little bit of a class advantage. And this horse seems to thrive on racing and working out. I mean, he has danced a lot of dances. He went to Sunland and ran toe-to-toe with Shitu in the last race. And then he came back out of that with another nice workout. And that's really when the trainer decided to ship to Illinois and run in this race. So he kind of seems to be along the mold of Wildcat Red and Sam Rat and whatever, at least in terms of being hardy and rather than just working and working out, kind of racing him into shape. A horse I did want to mention, just kind of a fun horse as a long shot. His name is Giant Step, and he has an interesting pedigree. He's full brother to Giant Oak, who used to run a lot of races in the Chicago circuits. Kind of a plotter, but he definitely should be able to get the 9 furlongs. And this field may look a little bit classier, but I'm kind of expecting a good race from Giant Step. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of odds he goes off at. The other race this weekend, it looks like another big field for the Lexington Stakes. And a couple horses are cross-entered between there and Illinois, but it looks like there's still going to be at least 9 or 10 horses in the Lexington.
Yeah, and a few of these we've seen kind of along the way. In this race, this is back at Keeneland, and like we said when we were talking about the Bluegrass, it's been really favorable towards closers, and I was really, really impressed by Mr. Speaker last time out over at Gulfstream in the Palm Beach. I did not think that he would run nearly as well as he did, and he came on really strong at the end of that race, which was a mile and eighth, like on the turf in grade 3. I will admit I'm a little bit biased on his form because I'm a big, big fan of Flubin, who ran in the Palm Beach with him, and Flubin's a strong closer, and Mr. Speaker flew by him like he was standing still, and that just really caught my eye. So, I think that he's really the one to look out for here in the Lexington.
A horse that goes to the all-weather surface for the first time, and he's actually had a couple of tough luck getting into some races, is Divine Oath. And this horse definitely has a Keeneland Poly type of pedigree. And his last 2 wins, both coming from behind, which seems to be the style and routes this meet, especially when it's a little bit hotter out. And Divine Oath, that last race, they set it up perfect, 45 and change, 109 and change, and it really came smoking down the lane. And this horse, I think, is pretty well meant, and that's going to be my official selection here. Mr. Speaker, I think he's the class of the field, and he ran good on the turf, but he kind of has a dirt pedigree. I'm not sold that he necessarily is even a turf horse. I still think they should try to go on the dirt with him. But I do think that Divine Oath is a stone-cold closer on any surface, so I think he might just be the play for me. Amy's Holiday, I've been following that horse since last fall up in Woodbine, and a lot of these horses come down and do well. He kind of got behind schedule. They had some snow and some cold weather at Oaklawn, so he missed some workouts. So they're probably using this to go back up to Woodbine, but he definitely has a little bit of positional speed, and he is an all-weather type horse. So I think Amy's Holiday may be a little bit liver than people think, but I really like Divine Oath in this spot. What about the horse coming out of Sunland, Dynamite Strike? He's entered in both races, the Illinois and the Lexington.
Yeah, I mean, he's by Tiz now. He's interesting. This race, I think, he's a little bit outclassed here. He just hasn't been running in this company. Barely broke his maiden last month. So, I just think his running style and just maybe a little bit outclassed is going to be maybe a bit too much here.
Should be an exciting week of races. Also, the Tessio Stakes is going on at Pimlico, and sometimes that gets a Preakness horse in the past. Now, I noticed that you've kind of put a couple of a post up with a lot of your contenders, and really what you're doing now is kind of just lumping them into 8 or 9 horses that you may play. But I noticed you said you're going to watch the final workouts and maybe some of the horses won't work out over the track, but they might gallop over the track.
Yeah, and I mean, just, seeing them gallop, seeing how they look, making sure none of them look like they've lost a lot of weight, and, going over work reports and making sure they all look healthy and look good. I mean, to me, it's not so much, I think people want to look at the work reports now and things and want to see who's looking great, but to me at this point, a good report doesn't mean a lot to me. They should all look good. If I'm watching the live stream and the workouts, they should all work out well. This is a grade 1 Kentucky Derby. I'll be more concerned about the ones who maybe don't look so great. And if those are any of the ones who I've been considering, then I'll probably maybe draw a line through them.
A couple of weeks ago when we last chatted, it still looked like the pace was going to be pretty contentious. Today's development with Constitution going out, I think that definitely takes away one of the... He was definitely a horse to me that was going to be up near the pace, if not on the pace, if he had any kind of post position. So that probably softens up the pace a little bit. And Uncle Si comes in, Cairo's back in now, Candy Boy's in. So do you still anticipate at least a contentious pace, if not a fast pace?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be contentious, but I agree that it probably won't be as bad as maybe we previously anticipated, because Constitution was, in my mind at least, really that horse who, he needed the lead, that he was going to do, fight tooth and nail to get it if he could. So without that, it does soften up a little bit. And I just think, for me, when I started delving into these horses more, I think there's just a lot of horses who we expect them to be up front because we've seen them up front in these major preps, but a lot of them have ran back, further in the pack in the past. One that I was looking at was General A-Rod, who We've seen him up front in every race he's ran in this year, but in his maiden special race, he closed from the back. So, I think some of these horses have an ability that we just haven't seen it recently, so maybe we haven't, thought of them in that manner.
What about California Chrome? He seems to be galloping, and he doesn't need the lead either. It just seems like the last couple of races, he's just gone to the lead. Just his natural speed is getting him up there.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the case. At the very least, I think he just kind of likes being forwardly placed. I don't think he necessarily likes being, back in the pack or behind horses and taking that dirt in his face. So, he is one who I will expect to be forwardly placed, but not necessarily on the lead.
We'll be talking next week. We're going to have a special edition of Down to the Wire. We're going to be inviting some handicappers from social media, and we're actually going to be discussing more like strategies for the Derby. We're going to talk a little bit about the pace. And then a couple weeks from now, we're actually going to come back right before the race, and then once we have post positions on a Thursday and do a quick video with our selections after we've seen them work out and stuff. But what are some of the topics next week? I know you wrote up some questions, and I know one of them for you is, early developers versus late developers, and then you got a horse like California Chrome where he's going totally old school, and he's ran 10 times already.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the horses who have, strong juvenile foundations versus like Opportunity, who didn't even run as a 2-year-old, and, talk about, pedigree versus what we're seeing on the screen. What do we use to project how these horses are going to run in the Derby and how they're going to handle 10 furlongs, and, we're just going to kind of delve into what we all use, as far as handicapping and how we go about it, because, you and I know the Derby's kind of a whole different deal when you're handicapping it. It's a lot more that goes into it than maybe you put in a normal, everyday race.
I think the one thing that's emerged over the last 2 weeks is there's no doubt about it anymore, especially with Constitution's injury. I mean, California Chrome will be the absolute favorite, and really it's just a matter, do you either play the favorite and try to do exactas and trifectas, or do you just toss the favorite because sometimes you like to toss the favorite and play for some money?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who the favorite is and how he's looked, and I think, California Chrome here, you can't deny that he absolutely has the strongest resume coming in here. But, I mean, I just talked about that in my blog that I had just written. He does have flaws. He is not unbeatable. There's definitely, reasons to be concerned for him, running at Churchill. For example, he has a very strong tendency to stumble out of the gate. Other than the San Felipe, he stumbled out of the gate almost every time he's ran this year. And, he has a really powerful stride, so he's been able to overcome that against small fields over in Santa Anita. But if he stumbles out of the gate at Churchill, you're in 15th place. Good luck to you. So, he's not perfect. He can be beaten.
Well, looking forward to next week's roundtable when we talk some of the general discussions with some other handicappers, and then we'll come back in a couple of weeks with the final Derby selections, and we'll, by that time we'll at least know the post positions, and we'll definitely have an early look at weather's going to be in play. So one thing this year, it looks like a lot of the horses are coming in late, and only a few horses might have a workout over Churchill Downs, so that'll definitely be interesting to watch. Thanks again for joining us this week on another edition of Down to the Wire.